The Iliad, Book 13. After Zeus had brought Hector and the Trojans to the Greek ships, he left the combatants to their misery and turned his luminous eyes far away, scanning the horse country of Thrace, the Mycenaeans, who fought in tight formation, the Hippomolgi, whose diet is mare's milk, and the Abi, most righteous of humans, and turned his eyes no more to Troy. He never dreamed that any of the immortals would go to help the Trojans or the Greeks. But Poseidon wasn't blind. He sat high on the topmost peak of wooded Samothrace, marveling at the war going on beneath him. He could see all of Ida, and Priam's city, and the Greek ships from where he sat. The sea crawled beneath him. He pitied the Greeks being beaten by the Trojans, and he was furious with Zeus. 3 enormous strides took him down the craggy mountain, and each footfall sent tremors through the wooded massif. As the immortal sea god descended, a 4th step took him to his goal, Ajax, where his fabulous palace was built, shimmering gold in the depths of the bay. He harnessed to his chariot a team of horses, bronze-hooved, gold-maned, and swift, and clothed himself in gold, and gripped his golden whip, and stepped onto his chariot, and went driving over the waves. The sea parted in joy before him, and all its denizens frolicked beneath him, acknowledging their lord. The chariot flew on. The bronze axle below never got wet, and the prancing horses took Poseidon to the Achaean ships. A wide cave is submerged in the deep water midway between Tenedos and rocky Imbros. The Earthshaker reined in his horses there, unhitched them, and threw out ambrosial fodder for them to eat. And he put hobbles of gold on their feet, so that they would wait there until their master returned. Then he went off to the Greeks. The Trojans were swarming behind Hector, like flame or rumbling wind, and their howls expressed their belief they would take the ships of the Greeks and kill beside them all their best. But Poseidon, who circles the earth and shakes it, had emerged from the sea to urge on the Argives. He assumed the form and voice of Calchas, and spoke to the Ajaxes, who were ready to hear. "You 2 men will save the Greek army if you just summon your strength and don't panic. The Trojans aren't invincible. The Greek line will hold everywhere else they've climbed the wall. It's only here that I have a premonition. We might be hurt, where a firestorm rages in the person of Hector, son of Zeus, as he says. May some god put in your hearts the will to stand firm yourselves and encourage the others. You could force Hector back from the ships then, even if the Olympian is behind his charge." And the Lord of Earthquake struck them both with his staff and pumped strength into them, lightening their limbs and their hands and feet. And the god himself rose like a hawk that lifts itself from a sheer precipice and soars downwind after another bird. So Poseidon was gone across the dusty plain. Oilean Ajax took all this in first, and said to Ajax, son of Telamon, "That was one of the Olympian gods, Ajax, disguised as the seer, ordering us to fight. Not Calchas himself, who reads birds for us. I could tell from the tracks he made when he left. Gods are easy to recognize. As for me, I never felt readier for battle. I'm itching to fight all the way down to my fingers and toes." Telamonian Ajax answered him, "Me too. I can't wait to wrap my hands around a spear." I'm all pumped up, and my feet are flying beneath me. Bring on, Hector. Just me and Priam's fighting machine." That was how they talked to each other, feeling the joy the god put in their hearts. Meanwhile, the Earthshaker was rousing the Greeks, who were catching their breath to the rear by the ships. They were all done in by the hard fighting, and couldn't take it when they saw the Trojans clambering over the wall in droves. They watched helplessly, tears in their eyes, and thought it was the end. But the Earthshaker slipped in among them and gave heart to the troops. Teucer first, then Leitus, the hero Peneleus, Thoas, and Deipyrus, Meriones and Antilochus. He came to them all, and his words had wings. "Shame on you, Argives, to think I trusted you raw recruits to fight for our ships. If you're backing off when the going gets tough, then this is the day we get beaten by the Trojans. I can't believe what is before my eyes. A disaster I thought would never happen. The Trojans going for our ships. Up until now, they've been like spooked deer that dodge through the woods to become dinner for jackals, panthers, and wolves. Totally defenseless, no fight in them. That's how the Trojans have been with us, unwilling to offer the slightest resistance. But now they're out fighting for our hollow ships, because, thanks to our leader's cowardice and dissension in the ranks, we would rather be killed beside our seagoing vessels than defend them. But even if Agamemnon is completely to blame for all this, because he dishonored Achilles, that's no reason for us to go slack in war. Let's do what good men do and make amends. It's no longer right for you to slough off. Not you, our army's best. I wouldn't bother with some sad sack who was sitting out the war. But with you I couldn't be angrier. You've gone soft, and the upshot of your laxness is going to be worse trouble to come, and soon. Don't you remember what shame is, or retribution? Do you think this is some minor skirmish? This is Hector, showing his strength. He's smashed the gates open and has taken the war to our ships." In this way, the Earthshaker roused the Achaeans. The columns that formed around the two Ajaxes were so tight they could have passed inspection from Ares or from Athena, the soldiers' goddess. These were hand-picked troops, Greece's best, who awaited the Trojans and godlike Hector, spear on spear, shield overlapping shield. They stood helmet to helmet, the horsehair plumes on the burnished crests brushing each other. When they nodded, and when they shook their spears, the shafts tickered against each other. Their minds were fixed on the fight ahead of them. The Trojans closed ranks and charged. Hector led them, driving straight ahead like a boulder from a cliff. A river swollen by winter rains will push a stone from a high crest, breaking it loose from its foundation by the sheer force of the water. The stone knows no shame as it caroms downstream, bounding high. The woods echo its sound, and nothing can stop it until it reaches level ground. But then, it rolls no more. So too with Hector. For a while he threatened to cut his way to the sea through the ships and huts, killing as he went. But when he hit the Greek line, he was stopped cold, and the sons of the Achaeans, thrusting with swords and spears, pushed him back. Shaken, Hector gave way, but his voice boomed out to the Trojans and their Lycian allies. "Stand your ground, men. This tight Greek formation cannot contain me. They'll fall back under my spear. All right, if it is true that the best of the gods Hera's thundering husband, has urged me on." Hector's speech aroused their enthusiasm. Deiphobus, Priam's son, strode out, almost danced out, behind the disk of his shield. Meriones took aim at him with a polished spear, and cast. The spear hit the taut bull's hide, but didn't pierce it, the long shaft shattering at its metal socket. Deiphobus held the shield at arm's length, afraid the point would come through. Meriones made his way back to his own people, angry because he had been cheated of victory, and had broken his spear. He made his way back through camp to retrieve a spare from his hut. The others fought on in the eye of war. Teucer, son of Telamon, killed his man first, the spearman Imbrius. His father, Mentor, raised horses, and he lived in Pedaeum before the war with his wife, Medicaste, one of Priam's bastard daughters. When the Danans came with their curved ships, he moved back to Ilion and had quarters in the house of Priam, who accorded him the same honor as his own natural children. Teucer jabbed his spear into his jaw, and when he pulled it out, Imbrius fell. He fell as an ash tree falls, a tree that is a landmark on a mountain crest, and when it is cut through with bronze axes, it brings all its soft leafage down to the ground. Imbrius's tooled bronze clattered around him, and Teucer rushed up to relieve him of it. Hector cast at the moving target he made, but Teucer had his eye on the bright spear and managed to dodge it. No matter. It hit Amphimachus instead, whose lineage went back through Cteatus to Poseidon, square in the chest as he entered battle. He crashed to the ground, bronze clattering, and Hector ran up to rip the helmet from Amphimachus's noble head. But he didn't get that far. Big Ajax lunged with his spear as Hector charged. The point never reached his bronze-cased skin, but it struck Hector's shield with enough force to drive him back from both fallen bodies, which the Greeks proceeded to drag away. Two Athenians, Stichius and Menestheus, hauled the Amphimachus off to the Greek side, while the two Ajaxes did the same for Imbrius. Two lions have snatched a goat from snarling dogs, and are carrying it off through thick underbrush, holding it in their jaws, high above the ground. They held Imbrius high and stripped him. When they got the armor off, Oilean Ajax, angry for Amphimachus, lopped off his head and whirled it like a ball through the crowd. It fell in the dust before Hector's feet. Poseidon was pulsing with anger. His son's son had fallen in the hard fighting. He went through the ships and huts to rally the Greeks and to build trouble for the Trojans. Idomeneus, the great spearman, bumped into him as he came from a friend who had been wounded, a gash in the knee, and carried out of battle. He had just briefed the medics and was going back to his hut, anxious to return to the fight, when the Earthshaker spoke to him, likening his voice to that of Andraemon's son, Thoas, lord in Pleuron and steep Calydon, and honored as a god by the Aetolians there. "Idomeneus, you, the Cretan commander, what has happened to all the threats the Greeks once issued against the Trojans?" And Idomeneus, commander of the Cretans: "Thoas, there's not a Greek here at fault, as far as I know. We're all experienced. No one has panicked. No one has deserted. My guess is that it is great Zeus's pleasure that the Achaeans die a nameless death here, far from Argos. But look, Thoas, you have always held your own in battle, and now you're rallying others. Keep it up, and don't let anyone hang back from the fight. And Poseidon, who shakes the continents. Idomeneus, may the man who willingly shirks battle today never return from Troy, but become a ragbone for the dogs of Ilion. Get your armor on and let's head out. We have to work together and do our best to help out. Even though we are only two, teamwork makes even riffraff do well, and you and I know how to fight with the best. He spoke and returned, a god, to men's toil. When Idomeneus reached his well-built hut, he strapped on his armor, took 2 spears, and walked out like a lightning bolt. That Zeus shakes down from Olympus's glare as a sign to humans, blinding forks of light, the bronze on the hero's chest as he ran. Meriones, his second in command, met him near the hut, where he was going to get a spear for himself. Idomeneus boomed out at him. Meriones, son of Molus, old friend, what's this sprint away from the battle? Are you wounded? Were you nicked? Or do you have a message for me? Myself, I'm not for sitting in the huts, but for fighting. And Meriones, who knew what to say. I came here for a spear, Idomeneus, if there are any left in your hut. The one I had shattered when it hit Deiphobus's shield. And Idomeneus, the Cretan commander. Spears? You can have 20 if you want, standing along the white plaster wall as you go in. Spears I take off Trojans I kill in close combat. I have plenty, shields too, and helmets, and breastplates. Meriones knew how to respond. The hut by my tarred ships is also filled with Trojan spoils, but it's not close by. I know what it means to fight up front and win my share of glory in war. There might be 1 or 2 Greeks around who haven't noticed, but not you. And the Cretan commander. I know you're good. Why talk about it? Look, suppose we were all lined up for an ambush. At times like that, it's obvious who has what it takes and who doesn't. Your coward will turn 10 shades of green. He's unsteady, shifting his weight from one foot to another. His heart thumps so loud you can hear it, and his teeth chatter as he keeps imagining his death. The brave man, though, doesn't blanch, and is not too afraid when he gets in position. His only prayer is to get on with the battle. At a time like that, no one would slight you if you were to hit in battle, or took a shot. It wouldn't be in the back or the neck, but in your chest or belly as you came on hard, in the front lines. Come on, though, let's not stand around talking like kids. Someone might see us and really blow up. Go on in and get yourself a spear. Meriones ducked into the hut, got a spear, and followed Idomeneus, intent on war. Ares himself sometimes goes to war, and takes with him his son, Rout, who is as valiant as his father, and can turn even the bravest man to flight. They arm themselves and go forth from Thrace, to join either the Ephrii or Phleges, but do not really care which side wins. Thus the 2 human captains, going to battle in their bronze, Meriones saying to Idomeneus, Where to, son of Deucalion? Should we enter on the right, center, or left, where the Greeks will likely need help the most? And Idomeneus, the Cretan commander, We have some good defense in the central ships, both Ajaxes and Teucer, our best bowmen, and a good man in hand-to-hand combat. These will give Hector all he wants and more, no matter how tough he is. He'll be fighting uphill all day, trying to beat them back, and burn the ships, and won't be able to unless Zeus himself throws a torch on the hulls. Ajax won't yield to anything human, that's for sure. Anything that eats bread can be split with bronze, or crushed with stones. He wouldn't even give way to Achilles, not in a close fight anyway, although no one could touch Achilles in the open field. As for us, let's do as you suggest, and go left, so we can find out whether we'll give glory to another, or another to us. He spoke, and Meriones, moving like Ares, led the way to the left side of the camp. When the Trojans saw Idomeneus and his lieutenant in their buffed armor, it was as if they had spotted a fire. Calling to each other, they converged on the pair, another knot in the battle by the sterns of the ships. Howling winds with gusts up to 50 on a day when the gravel roadbeds are dry will raise up indiscriminate clouds of dust. That was how they closed with each other, and all their blind desire was to shred flesh with stropped bronze, eyes squinting against the glare of helmets and corselets. Just polished that morning, and the confusion of shields, like so many suns, shining through a bristling forest of spears. It was glorious to see, if your heart were iron, and you could keep from grieving at all the pain. There were 2 strong sons of Cronus out that day, with opposing purposes, as to which human heroes they should afflict. Zeus planned victory for Hector and the Trojans, to honor Achilles. He had no desire to destroy the Greeks on Troy's dusty plain, but meant only to honor Thetis and her son. Poseidon, rising secretly from the grey salt sea, went among the Greeks, urging them on, hating to see them beaten by the Trojans, and was strongly resentful of his brother Zeus. They were born of the same stock, but Zeus was born first, and he knew more, and so Poseidon avoided giving aid openly, but spurred on the Greeks, disguised as a man. So these 2 tightened the cords of war, and tied around each army in turn a knot that brought many down to their knees. Idomeneus, hair flecked with gray, and yelling for Greeks to back him up, jumped at the Trojans and scattered them with his first kill. This was Othryoneus, who, though from Cabesus, was one of Troy's inner circle. Smelling war, he had come to the capital and asked to marry Priam's most beautiful daughter, Cassandra herself, promising no wedding gifts, but one great deed, that he would drive the Greeks from Trojan soil. Old Priam promised her with a nod of his head, and Othryoneus, putting his faith in promises, went out to fight, swaggering along. He made a perfect target for Idomeneus' spear, which lodged in his belly under his useless corselet. He fell heavily, and Idomeneus taunted him. "You'll be the happiest man on earth, Othryoneus, if you accomplish all you promised Dardanian Priam. We hear he promised you his own daughter. We could match his offer, you know, and give you Agamemnon's loveliest daughter. Ship her here from Argos for the wedding. If only you'd switch to our side and conquer Troy. Come on over to the ships so we can negotiate this marriage. You'll find we offer easy terms." And he started to drag him off by one leg, through the crowd, but Aeneas came to the dead man's aid, advancing on foot just in front of his horses, which his charioteer drove so closely behind him, that their breath warmed his neck. He never got off the shot he wanted. Idomeneus was too quick, catching him in the throat beneath the chin and slicing the bronze clean through. Odysseus fell. A Troy, oak, say, or poplar, or spreading pine, falls in the forest when carpenters cut it down with their bright axes to be the beam of a ship. Odysseus lay before his horses and chariot, groaning heavily and clawing the bloody dust. His charioteer lost his wits completely, and in his terror didn't even have enough nerve to turn the horses around and run for it. Antilochus stitched him through the belly, a neat shot just below his corselet, and he fell gasping from his crafted chariot. Antilochus drove the horses back to the Greeks. Deiphobus took Odysseus' death hard. He closed in on Idomeneus and cast, but Idomeneus saw his shot all the way and ducked beneath his shield, a huge double oval of leather and bronze, fitted with 2 rods. Deiphobus' spear grated on the rim and sailed over, but, with all of Deiphobus' weight behind it, kept going and hit Hypsenor, Hippasus' son, in the liver. His knees buckled, and Deiphobus crowed over him. Odysseus is avenged. When he goes down to Hades' cold gates, he can be glad that at least I have sent him some company. The Greeks winced at this boast, and no one more so than Antilochus, who did what he could for his fallen comrade, standing over him and sheltering him with his shield until 2 of his men, Megistius and Alastor, bore Hypsenor, groaning heavily, to the hollow ships. Idomeneus was still going strong, doing his best to get the drop on some Trojan, or just pound himself against their general menace, when the hero Alcalthus appeared before him. This man, son of Aeacites, beloved of Zeus, had married Anchises' eldest daughter, Hippodamia, darling of both her parents, beautiful, clever with her hands, and wise, and now wife of the best man in all Troy. This Alcathous Poseidon now mastered, putting a spell on his shining eyes, and paralyzing him, so that he stood rooted to the spot like a gravestone or tree, unable to move or dodge the spear that Idomeneus now put through his chest, cleaving the bronze breastplate that had always protected his flesh from fatal harm, but that now rasped dryly around the wooden shaft. He fell backward, the spear's point fixed deep in the still beating heart, so that the upright shaft quivered a while, until at last Ares put its fury at ease. Idomeneus gloated over him loud and long. "Are we even yet, Deiphobus? 3 deaths for 1. Do you want to boast some more? Why don't you get out here and face me, so you can see a true descendant of Zeus? Minos, my grandfather, was his son, overlord of Crete by his divine will, and his son Deucalion fathered me, lord over many in the wide land of Crete. And now the ships have brought me here, as a curse to your father and the other Trojans." He spoke, and Deiphobus couldn't decide whether he should step back and get help, or take Idomeneus on by himself. He decided he'd better go get Aeneas, and found him in the rear, the last man there, always as angry with Priam, who utterly failed to honor his worth. Deiphobus grew near, and his words flew fast. "Aeneas, counselor of the Trojans, Alcathous is down and you have to help. If you have any feelings at all for a kinsman, your sister's husband, who cared for you when you were little. Come on, let's go. Idomeneus has killed him with his spear. This wrung Aeneas's heart, and he moved up to find Idomeneus. The war mattered to him now, a great deal. Idomeneus was not one to run like a spoiled child, but stood his ground. A boar in the mountains is sure of his strength, and when gangs of hunters try to flush him out in some desolate spot, he waits as they come, bristling his back, eyes blazing, whetting the tusks he will use to scatter the men and their dogs. Idomeneus, famed for his spear, waited as Aeneas came on. He didn't yield an inch, but he called to his friends, Ascalaphus, Apharius, Deipyrus, Meriones, and Antilochus, masters of the war cry. His words flew out to them as he urged. Come, help me out, friends. I'm by myself and scared to death of this Aeneas, who's closing in fast. He's a hell of a fighter, and in his prime. If we were his age, and in the mood we're in, it'd be over so fast. He might still win big, but so might I. And they closed ranks, locking their shields. Opposite them, Aeneas called to his comrades, to Deiphobus and Paris and Agenor, his peers in the Trojan command. Their troops flocked behind them. Sheep following rams from pasture, to water the shepherd's joy. Aeneas that glad when he saw a nation of soldiers at his back. They fought over Alcathous with their long pikes, and the bronze plate on their chests rang like gongs. And above them all two men, Idomeneus and Aeneas, like gods of war, strained to shred each other's flesh with cold metal. Aeneas cast first, but Idomeneus, watching him all the way, sidestepped the missile, which, launched by a strong arm but with nowhere to go, burrowed, quivering, into the earth. Idomeneus's throw hit Oenemus full in the belly, and smashing the plates on his corselet, and letting his entrails gush through the hole, he fell, clawing at the dust, Idomeneus's spear casting a long shadow on the plain. He pulled it from the corpse, but could not get the armor off, with all the pressure he was under. The veteran could no longer trust his feet in a charge, either to follow his own throw or dodge another's, and so, unable also to get away quickly, he had no choice but to stand and fight, and beat off the pitiless day of doom. As he inched his way back, Deiphobus, whose anger toward him had not lost its edge, took a shot at him. His spear burned the air, but missed Idomeneus again, hitting instead Ascalaphus, Ares' son. Stitching his shoulder, he fell to the ground and clawed at the dust. Ares as yet knew nothing of his son's fall. The blaring god sat tinder golden clouds on Olympus's peak, constrained from war by Zeus's will, along with the other immortals. The fighting began over Ascalaphus's body. Deiphobus managed to tear off his helmet, but dropped it when he was hit in the arm by Meriones' spear. It fell with a clang. Meriones sprang again, like a vulture, pulled his spear out of Deiphobus' arm, then drifted back into the ranks. Polites, Deiphobus's brother, wrapping his arms around his waist, escorted him out of harm's way, and to the rear, where his horses stood waiting to pull him, groaning in his ornamented chariot, back to the city, blood dripping from his arm. The rest fought on, drowning in their own noise. Aeneas jumped Aphareus, Caletor's son, and having a good angle on his throat, sliced through it with his spear. Aphareus's head sank to one side, and his helmet clanged on his shield, as death hammered at his soul like a tinsmith. Antilochus, waiting for his moment, caught Thoon turning his back. His quick thrust severed the vein that runs up to the neck, and Thoon was left supine in the dust, stretching his arms out to his comrades. Antilochus leapt on top of him, and began unbuckling the armor from his shoulders, keeping an eye on the Trojans, who circled him. They kept poking at his big, bright shield from every direction, but couldn't stick a point into his flesh. This the doing of Poseidon, who guarded Nestor's son with all his power, no matter the spear points around him. Antilochus was constantly engaged with the enemy, his spear never at rest, but always quivering with his desire to cast or thrust it home. He was taking dead aim at someone in the throng when Idomeneus, Aeneas' son, zeroed in on him and hit his shield from point-blank range. The blue-maned sea god cancelled the shot and denied it the life of Antilochus. Half the spear stuck in the shield like a charred steak, the other half lay on the ground. Idomeneus knew fate when he saw it, and backed away. But Meriones went after him, and his throw caught Idomeneus where Ares hurts men worst, sticking him between the navel and the genitals. He doubled over, leaning into the shaft, and writhed and twisted the way a bull will when mountain men tie it and drag it along. So too Idomeneus, but only for a while, until the hero Meriones drew the spear from his gut. Then darkness drifted like a veil on his eyes. In the hand-to-hand fighting, Helenus hit Deipyrus' temple with a huge Thracian sword, ripping the helmet from his head and sending it rolling through the combatant's feet, until one of the Greeks scooped it up. By then, Deipyrus' eyes had gone black. The son of Atreus took his death hard. Menelaus, good at the war cry, and he strode menacingly toward the Trojan hero, brandishing his sharp spear as Helenus drew back his bow. They each shot at once, the spear and arrow crossing in mid-air. Helenus' needling arrow going on to hit Menelaus' breastplate and clang off the bronze. Think of dark beans or lentils bounding up from the broad shovel a winnower wields in a great threshing floor, swept by shrill winds. Thus the arrow that ricocheted off Menelaus' corselet and went flying away. But Menelaus' own shot wasn't wasted, the sharp spear point hitting Helenus' bow hand and going through it into the polished wood. He fell back among his comrades, avoiding death, the ash-wood spear trailing from his hand, until great Agenor pulled it out for him, and bound the hand with a strip of twisted wool. A sling, actually, from his squire's kit. Pisander now made straight at Menelaus, death drawing him on toward his fated end. To be killed by you, Menelaus, in the melee. When they were within range of each other, they each cast, Menelaus' spear missing wide. Peisander's hitting his shield, but shattering at the socket against its metal face. Peisander still had hope for victory, and when the son of Atreus leapt at him with his silver-studded sword, Peisander drew from beneath his shield an axe of fine bronze, with a long haft of polished olive wood. They struck each other at the same moment, Peisander's axe hitting Menelaus' helmet, on the horn, just beneath the horsehair plume. Menelaus' sword smashing Peisander's brow just above the nose. The bones snapped, both eyeballs popped out in blood and dropped at his feet. In the dust, and Peisander doubled over and fell. Menelaus put his foot on his chest, and as he ripped off his armor and gloated over him, "All you Trojans will be leaving our ships like this, you arrogant bastards. You can't get enough of fighting, can you? Can't get enough of abusing people, as you've abused me. No room in your heart for the anger of Zeus, the Lord of Thunder, God of host and guest, whose wrath will destroy your towering city. You came and took my bride, made off with all my stuff, and after you were her guest. And now you're all hot to burn our ships, cut us off from the sea, and kill our men. But you won't, for all your eagerness to fight. Father Zeus, they say you are the wisest of gods and men, yet all this is from you. Somehow you honor these violent men, these Trojans, with their reckless strength and insatiable appetite for the horrors of war. When it comes to getting enough, everyone else would rather have all they want of sleep or love, of sweet song or fine dancing. But the Trojans are gluttons for war and cannot get enough." Thus Menelaus, as he stripped off the last bit of bloody gear and gave it to his men, then went back and took his place in the front. He was attacked immediately by Harpalion, who followed his king, his father, Pylaemenes, to Troy and the war, but never returned home. His spear hit Menelaus' shield from close range, but not hard enough to go through. Unnerved, Harpalion drifted back to his comrades, glancing warily over his shoulder, half expecting to feel bronze in his skin. As he retreated, Meriones shot at him. The bronze-tipped arrow hit his right buttock, sliding beneath the bone and into his bladder. Harpalion sank into his comrades' arms and breathed out his life, stretched on the ground like an earthworm in a pool of black blood. The Paphlagonians tended to him, and took him on a chariot to sacred Ilion, in sorrow. His father went with them, weeping. Nothing would ever replace his dead son. Paris was enraged at his killing. Among the Paphlagonians, Harpalion had been his host, and in anger for his sake, he let fly an arrow tipped with bronze, and a man named Euchenor got in its way. He was the son of the prophet Polyidus, rich, with estates in Corinth, a good man. When he boarded ship for Troy, he knew well he was embarking on death, for his father, old Polyidus, had told him often that he must die of painful disease at home or be killed by Trojans amid Achaean ships. He chose to avoid both the heavy Greek fine for avoiding service and the loathsome disease. Paris's arrow hit him behind his jawbone. His soul crawled out, and the world went dark. The fight went on. like wildfire burning. Hector, whom Zeus loved, did not know that on the left side of the ships his army was succumbing to the Greeks, who were not far from winning the day. The god who laps the earth and makes it tremble was urging them on and adding his own strength to their efforts. Hector was still where he had first burst through the gate and shattered the Greek ranks, close to where Ajaxes and Protesilaus' ships were drawn up on the beach of the grey salt sea, and the wall was lowest. Horses and men fought furiously there, in the vortex of battle. There the Boeotians and fringed Ionians, the Locrians, Pythians, and proud Achaeans had their hands full trying to repel Hector's attack on the ships. Hector was like a bright flame and could not be stopped, not even by the Athenian elite, whose captain was Menestheus, Peteos' son, and who had with him men like Phytus, Stichius, and valiant Bias. The Achaeans were led by Meges, son of Phyleus, and by Amphius and Dracius, the Pythians by Medon and steady Podarces. Medon was a bastard son of Oileus and Ajax's brother, but he lived in Phylace, far from his homeland, because he had killed a relative of Areopis, his stepmother, whom Oileus had married. Podarces was Iphiclus' son, and Phylaces' grandson. Armed and in the front of the Pythian forces, they fought alongside the Boeotians to defend their ships. Oileus' other son, the swift Ajax, was inseparable from Telamonian Ajax, and would not leave his side, even for an instant. A team of oxen, with faces dark as wine, strain together at the jointed plow, pulling it through a field that has not been worked in years. Sweat oozes up from the roots of their horns, and only the polished yoke holds them apart, as they cut the furrow to the field's far edge. The two Ajaxes stood side by side in battle. Telamonian Ajax had his cadres with him, and there was always someone to relieve him of his heavy shield when he began to tire. But the Locrians, commanded by Oilean Ajax, were not at his side. They were not trained to stand and fight at close range, nor equipped. They had no bronze, plumed helmets, no shields, no ashwood spears, but trusting to the bows and twisted wool slings they had brought when they followed him to Troy, they now shot thick and fast, trying to break the Trojan lines. In the front, troops in full battle gear, engaging Hector and his Trojans. In the rear, archers, and the Trojans, confounded by their arrows, were losing the will to fight. They would have been beaten miserably from the beachhead camp back to windy Ilion, had not Polydamas approached Hector and said, "Hector, you are a difficult man to persuade, because Zeus has made you preeminent in war, and you want to excel in council too. But you can't have everything. Zeus makes one man a warrior, another a dancer, another a singer, and in another's heart he puts wisdom, by which many profit, and which saves many, as the god himself best knows. So I will say to you what seems best to me. All around you blazes a ring of war. The Trojans have passed over the wall, but some are standing on the sidelines, and others are fighting in skirmishes. Throughout the ships against superior numbers. Let's fall back and regroup, weigh our options, and decide whether to attack the ships in the hope of victory from the god, or at least a safe retreat. As for myself, I fear the Greeks will pay us back for yesterday. He is still waiting back there, you know, and he loves to fight. He won't sit out the whole war. This seemed like sound advice to Hector. He leapt to the ground with his gear, and his words flew to Polydamas. Draw back all our best and keep them here, while I go off to pass the word. I'll be back as fast as I can. And he went off like an avalanche down a mountain, speeding through the Trojans and their allies, and shouting as he went. At the sound of his voice they all went back, toward Polydamas. Hector moved up to the fighters at the very front. He was looking for Deiphobus, for Helenus, for Adamas and Adamas's father Asius, and hardly found them unscathed. They were either dead beside the Greek ships, or nursing wounds inside the city's walls. He did find Paris, though, Helen's lord, urging on his men at the left side of battle, and started in on him with abusive epithets. Paris, you desperate, preening, pretty boy! Where is Deiphobus? And where are Helenus and Adamas, and Adamas's father Asius? And where is Othryoneus? Troy is doomed! The whole towering city as good as gone! And Paris, who could have passed for a god. I see you're in a testy mood, Hector. I may have held back from battle before, but not now. My mother didn't raise a total weakling. Ever since you started this attack on the ships, we've been right here engaging the Greeks. As for our comrades you're asking about, they are dead, except for Deiphobus and Helenus, who have gone off with spear wounds in their arms, saved by Zeus from death. Now, lead on wherever you will, and we will follow. I don't think you will find us lacking in determination, and we will fight to the best of our ability. No man can do more. Spoken like a hero. Hector calmed down, and they plunged into the brutal eye of combat, which was around Cebriones and Polydamas, and Phalces and Arthaeus, godlike Polyphetes, Ascanius and Morris, son of Hippotion. These had come from Ascania's farmland the morning before as replacement troops, and now Zeus roused them on to battle. Aching winds sweep down to the ground under rolling thunder from the patriarch Zeus, and then clash with the sea. The water moans and is whipped into wave after wave of arching, seething breakers capped with white foam. The Trojans kept coming, rank on rank, flashing with bronze behind their captains. Hector, son of Priam, led them all, and he was like the war god himself, behind his balanced shield, thick with hide, and layered with welded bronze, and on his head the crest of his helm rippled in shining wind. He kept testing the Greek lines here and there to see if they would yield before him as he came on behind his shield. But the Greeks didn't flinch. Then big Ajax strode forward. Come closer, sweetheart. No need to be coy. We're not exactly inexperienced in war, you know. It was Zeus who whipped us before. I'm sure you'd like to rip our ships apart, but be just as sure we have hands to defend them. Your city, with all its people, will likely fall a lot sooner, captured by us and plundered. As for you, the day will soon be here when you pray to Zeus and all immortals for your combed horses to outfly falcons and take you through the dusty plain to Troy. His words were not out before a bird flew past on the right, a high soaring eagle. The Achaeans shouted, taking heart at the omen. But Hector answered him, "You bumbling ox, what a stupid thing to say! I wish it were as certain that I were Zeus's son, and Hera my mother, and that I were honored equally with Apollo and Athena, as it is that this day will bring doom to every last Greek, and you among them, killed by my long spear, if you have the guts to wait for it to pierce your lily-white skin, and leave your larded flesh to glut the dogs and birds of Troy, after you have fallen amid the ships." With that he led the charge, followed by Trojans shrieking at the top of their lungs. The Greeks answered with cries of their own, digging in their heels as Troy's best came on. And the noise from both armies blended together and rose through the air to the brightness of Zeus.